try to do this video. This is the terrifying final moments of Michael Rockefeller. It is currently Tuesday, the 4th, and I am going to be looking over at the TV because I am in a tornado warning. So fun. That happened on Friday. Had tornado strike about 20 minutes north of me, and then about an hour and a half south of me. And now there's one that struck about an hour southwest of me. And I am just above that path that it's going to be going, and my dogs are obviously eating. So if I do glance over, I got the news in the background just so I know what's going on. All right, let's get to this video. By the way, this is a new channel, Thoughty2. I think I pronounced it right.
Hey, Thoughty2 here.
Okay.
On the 17th of November 1961, a young American man vanished in what was then Dutch New Guinea. After an arduous investigation, the authorities deemed that he'd drowned after his boat capsized a few clicks off the coast of the town of Agatz in the Arafura Sea. His remains were never recovered. Intriguing? Kind of. But strap yourself in because two crucial details transform this tepid tale into a scintillating saga. First, the man who went missing was Michael Clark Rockefeller, son of a future vice president and great-grandson of one of the richest men who ever lived. And second, contrary to the official report, Michael Rockefeller didn't drown in the autumn of 1961. Rather, he was eaten by cannibals. To tell his tale, we must travel to faraway frontiers, unlock the secrets of one of the planet's most secluded tribes, unravel a governmental cover-up that's lingered for decades, and confront some unpalatable truths. Oh, and stick around to the end, because this one has a truly spectacular twist. From birth, Michael was bathed in privilege. New York was his playground, a world of luxury and abundance, spending his days beside future titans of politics and industry at some of America's most acclaimed academies. He graduated from Harvard in 1960. The powerful pedigree of Michael's family propelled his academic ascent, but he wasn't just some spoiled silver spoon scion. He boasted big brains as well as his big bankroll. With the world at his feet and a Rockefeller legacy to uphold, his path seemed set in stone. But first, Michael yearned for an adventure. The Rockefellers had always been admirers and patrons of fine art. Michael's grandmother founded the famous Museum of Modern Art in New York, and his father, Nelson, had a particular penchant for what was then called primitive art, non-Western artwork crafted by indigenous peoples around the world. In 1954, Nelson founded a gallery in which to showcase his passion. No force in the universe rivals a son's desire to make his father proud. And what better way for Michael to achieve this than to curate a collection of global wonders for his father's new gallery. In 1961, Michael Rockefeller departed for a daring art-gathering expedition to Dutch New Guinea, home of the Asmat, an ethnic group almost unknown to the Western world at the time. Visiting the Asmat was like taking a time machine back to the Stone Age. When Michael turned up, they had no textiles or metals. They hadn't even invented the wheel. But whilst they weren't too clued up on tech, they were masters of arts and crafts. Even today, Asmat wood carvings are highly sought after by collectors. Don't get the wrong impression though, the Asmat weren't some quiet tribe of master craftsmen who wouldn't say boo to a New Guinea goose. When they weren't whittling wood, they were waging war. Either that or engaging in their favourite pastimes of headhunting, ritual cannibalism, and monopoly. Their way of life was a far cry from the silver spoons and skyscrapers Michael was used to. But he was undeterred. In fact, he threw himself into this passion project with purpose and panache. Michael's diary entries from this time reveal a man entranced by the strange new world into which he'd stumbled. For 6 months he lived amongst the Asmat, studying their way of life and procuring art for his father's museum. He amassed an almighty collection. You can still see most of it today in the Michael C. Rockefeller wing of the Met in New York. Which is all very lovely, but as you already know, this story doesn't have a happy ending. Michael was travelling with anthropologist René Vassing and their 2 local guides when a wave capsized their boat 3 miles from shore. With no comms equipment on board, the guides swam to get help, whilst Mike and René stayed with the stricken vessel. To begin with, they weren't especially worried, but they were steadily drifting further from the shore, and after 24 hours with no sign of rescue, Michael's patience wore thin. The guides had clearly abandoned them, and with each passing second, the swim back to safety stretched out before them. He stripped to his boxer shorts, tied a couple of empty jerry cans around his waist, and struck out for shore. Now, the question that's fascinated historians and amateur sleuths ever since is simple. What happened next?
How do they know that he did that? Did this guy get rescued? I'm probably going to fill it in right now because it looks like a boat's coming right over here.
René Vassing, that question has a brief answer. He stayed with the boat and was rescued by the Dutch a few hours later. Their popping guides had sought help as promised, but they'd had to trudge through several miles of mudflats, mangroves, and mosquito-infested forests after swimming ashore. As for Michael, he was busy turning himself into a modern-day myth. When word of his disappearance...
Wow. Tornado dropped about an hour south of me. Alrighty.
When word of his disappearance reached the Rockefellers in the US, they used their plentiful political and financial leverage to launch the largest manhunt in the history of the South Pacific, involving thousands of locals, a multitude of ships, helicopters, and spotter planes. Michael's father and twin sister flew to Dutch New Guinea to personally oversee the search. Despite this monumental effort, no trace of Michael was ever found. And after 10 fruitless days, the Rockefellers returned home. The manhunt was officially called off 2 weeks later, and Michael was declared legally dead by drowning in 1964. At the time, his estate was worth $660,000, about $7 million today. Not bad for a graduate. Ever since his disappearance, there have been doubts about the official version of events. It's generally assumed that René and Michael were between 10 and 14 miles offshore when Michael abandoned the ship. That's a hell of a swim in open water, but it certainly isn't impossible. Don't let Michael's unassuming appearance fool you. As a university varsity wrestler and former soldier, he was tough as nails. He was also a supremely strong swimmer, had rudimentary flotation aids with him, and perhaps most importantly of all, he was fighting for his life. People can achieve incredible things when failure means certain death.
Yeah, but if a shark is hungry, you're in its territory.
Just watch Squid Game. It's intriguing that despite the scale of the search effort, Michael's body was never found. A drowned man roped to jerry cans should float, but nothing surfaced. The local wildlife is often blamed for this conundrum. Hammerhead sharks and saltwater crocodiles infest these waters, but shark attacks are practically unheard of in the area, and whilst the colossal crocs pose a threat, they're notoriously messy eaters. If one did get him, there would have been a few chunks left over. In the years after Michael fell off the map, several people attempted to replicate the swim he would have been faced with in 1961, and all of them made it to the shore alive. It's for that reason, and others I'll come to in a minute, that convinced many he was still out there. Amongst them was Milt Macklin, the renowned editor of an adventure magazine called Argosy. In October 1968, Macklin was visited by an Australian smuggler who claimed to have new information about Michael's disappearance. Little did he know that his information was about to melt Milt Macklin's mind. Try saying that 5 times quickly. This was 1968, remember, 7 years since Michael disappeared, and yet, whilst visiting a remote island off the east coast of New Guinea 10 weeks prior, the smuggler claims to have seen the lost Rockefeller with his own 2 eyes. Now, Milt Macklin was an ex-military man, explorer, and a master of the mustache. But above all else, he was a journalist who knew how to sniff an exclusive scoop. So he packed up his life in New York and charted a course for New Guinea. However, the first leg of his journey proved fruitless. He visited the islands the smuggler had told him about, only to find it deserted, with no signs of habitation. But Macklin hadn't flown 9,000 miles to get TKO'd when the first hurdle smacked him round the head, especially since he'd noticed a curious trend. Nobody in New Guinea believed Michael Rockefeller had drowned in 1961. By interviewing both Dutch and indigenous locals, Macklin slowly pieced together the events that led to Michael's death. And what he learned shocked him to his very core. In 1957, 4 years before Michael arrived in New Guinea, a battle between 2 rival Asmat villages saw the deaths of over 100 people in a single day. The Dutch colonists were incensed. They were on a mission to civilize the locals, and 100 murders doesn't exactly scream high society. Keen to bring them to heel, the Dutch dispatched an armed patrol. One thing led to another, and when the dust had settled, 5 warriors from the village of Ochenep lay dead from Dutch gunfire. Asmat culture was really into all that an eye for an eye stuff. If a rival village killed someone in yours, you had to kill someone in theirs. It wasn't about spite, but a central tenet of their system of spirituality. So the 5 dead warriors from Ochenep needed to be avenged in order to restore balance to the world. But retaliation against the Dutch was basically impossible. Their guns were so technologically advanced, they may as well have been magic wands. However, the Dutch weren't the only people from the white tribe in New Guinea. After a tired and helpless Michael Rockefeller washed ashore near Ochenep, the Asmat saw an opportunity to avenge their fallen brethren. Michael was killed, butchered, and eaten as payback for crimes he probably wasn't even aware of. Macklin returned to America in April 1969 after 4 months in New Guinea. He'd seen and heard enough to be convinced that Michael Rockefeller was the victim of a cannibalistic killing. He published his findings in a book called The Search for Michael Rockefeller. It presented a convincing case, but one thing was missing: hard evidence. Without it, doubts would always remain. Over the years, the story slowly faded from the public consciousness. Considering how frankly mental the whole thing is, it's surprising how few people actually know about it. But the case was reignited in 2014 when author Carl Hoffman published his research into Michael's disappearance. Like Macklin, Hoffman travelled to New Guinea in search of clues. Unlike Macklin, Hoffman also paid a visit to the Dutch colonial archives in The Hague, where he found a plethora of documents showcasing that several Dutch officials and missionaries had suspected Michael's death at the hands of the Ochenep headhunters. Crucially, he also discovered that the Dutch had deliberately suppressed the truth.
I could see that. Sure.
As for why?
Probably so there wouldn't be any retaliation from the Americans to that tribe. You know, kind of like he just shouldn't have been there kind of thing. So let's just cut.
As for what?
Let's just cut the losses now and just let everything just settle. Everyone just walk away. That's what I would believe.
Michael's disappearance occurred during a tumultuous period in New Guinea's history. The Dutch were in the process of relinquishing control to Indonesia, and they were keen to show the world what a good job they'd done civilizing the locals. Revealing that cannibals had consumed a member of one of the world's most powerful families would have been a PR disaster. So they did what all governments do with embarrassing information. They buried it. By the way, if you're wondering what the Rockefellers made of these revelations, the truth is, nobody outside the family knows. Publicly, they've always stuck to the official version that Michael drowned. Rumours suggest they hired a private investigator to visit the Asmat in the late 70s. Whilst he was there, he allegedly traded a boat engine for 3 human skulls, those of the only white men the Ochanet had ever killed. Whether or not any of them belonged to Michael is unknown, but supposedly the investigator was paid $250,000 for smuggling the skulls back to America, so I'll let you draw your own conclusions. By this point in the video, you may believe it's an open and shut case. Michael Rockefeller was surely killed and eaten by the Asmat. However, it isn't quite so simple. Consider this. All the documented evidence we have so far can be traced back to a single source, the Asmat themselves. No outsiders witnessed Michael's alleged murder, and his remains have never been found. Everything we think we know comes from Asmat confessions, either made to the Dutch in the 60s or, more recently, to Carl Hoffman. It's entirely plausible that the Asmat took credit for the murder to appear more powerful to Western visitors. There is a second possibility, though, that the Asmat came up with the lie to hide an even more remarkable truth. That's right, it's twist time. Milt Macklin returned from New Guinea in the late 60s with hundreds of hours of footage documenting his visit. The reels lay untouched in a safe until 2008, when they were recovered by, of all people, Charlton Heston's son, Fraser, who was making a documentary about Macklin's trip. The reels were a goldmine of information, but it was when Fraser stumbled upon footage of dozens of Asmat canoes charging down a river that he noticed something absolutely insane. Hidden amongst the Asmat was a single naked white guy, apparently one of the tribe. Could the Asmat have come up with the whole, yeah, we ate that guy, to cover up the truth that Michael had become one of them? The film's too grainy for any serious analysis, but you have to admit, the man bears more than a passing resemblance to a slightly older Michael Rockefeller. Plus, if it isn't him, who the hell is it? Far-fetched as that sounds, it's worth pointing out that almost every contemporary report from the time of Michael's death mentions how the experience transformed him. After his son's disappearance, Nelson Rockefeller even admitted in a TV interview that Michael had been his happiest during the expedition. The idea that the heir to one of the world's richest families gave it all up to live out his days amongst a primitive tribe in a distant land is a tantalizing possibility. Could Michael still be alive to this day, even in his mid-80s? Whilst implausible, considering he's been dwelling in the forests of New Guinea without access to modern medical care for so long, it's by no means impossible. So then, drowned? Eaten by sharks? Eaten by people? Or a lost millionaire who went native? You tell me.
I don't know what I would answer. He was a strong swimmer. He had the gas tanks on him, so that would help with the swimming. But what if he got caught in a pretty good rip current or rip tide, and he was swimming, and all of a sudden he had to swim out of it, and he got to a place where he just kind of, I don't know, maybe he was attacked, eaten by, it could have been attacked by a shark, could have been, crocodiles. The cannibal part, I that's probably the least thing. On this picture right here, I can't tell you that's 100% a white guy. That could be just a light-skinned black person. And with the grainy picture, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't say absolutely white guy. Can't say that. Yeah, I don't know. So what do you think happened? Leave it in the comments. Like and subscribe. And, wow, I am in the very likely tornado range now. So, fun times for me tonight. Have a good day. Have a good night.